Hunting or Bust, The Journey Onward by Master Atlan, Chapter 32, The Bird, the Fox, and the Hero. Ring, 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 ring. Pyrrha stirred as the warmth of her bed and the sun's rays was contrasted by the horrible sound of the alarm. She gently opened her eyes and located her scroll before quickly ending the noise. She sat up, her long red hair spilling over her face while being out of its usual ponytail. She stifled the yawn and rubbed her eyes before looking over the room. Ren was already out of bed and dressed in his usual green outfit, which also functioned as pajamas. It must have been incredibly convenient to be able to sleep and fight in the same clothes. Pyrrha doubted she could get comfortable and rest while wearing her armor and corset. Inversely, she hesitated to think about fighting grim and evil off wearing just a black tank top and shorts. She noticed the pink-eyed boy was taking a moment to wake up his partner to no avail, nor slumped away a mix of blissful moaning and snoring while she wrapped herself up in her comforter. She was actually quite envious of the excitable girl's ability to sleep through the noise and spoke up to Ren. "Why don't you go ahead and get prepared first? I think we both know that waking Nora up this early is a fruitless effort." Ren hung his head in a reluctant agreement. "I suppose you're right." He started making his way to the shower and motioned beside her. "You might want to try waking him up too." The redhead turned and looked over at the exhausted form of their leader as he nestled into his bed. He was knackered with bags under his eyes, probably not opposed to the idea of melding with his pillow at the moment. He didn't even have the time to change out of his armor and clothes before he just passed out on his bed. She could only stare at him in silence with a tinge of regret in her eyes. John had been busy and preoccupied lately, hanging around with Cardin. Even thinking about that arrogant, vulgar man made her skin crawl, and seeing John beside him so it just made it worse. And why was he hanging around with Cardinal so much was something they couldn't figure out. He barely said hello to any of their friends and came back to the room so late they were already asleep. But they could tell that even though John conversed and stuck around with them, that he looked miserable. She wanted to confront him and ask him what was wrong, but she couldn't find the nerve to do it. She couldn't find it in herself to say anything after she had departed the rooftop, after he had confessed his deceit to her. She didn't know what to do. Her head was filled with confusion and worry and dread. She wished it wasn't true. She wished it was just a bad joke and this was all just build up. She wished she wished she didn't just turn away and walk when she should have said something. She wished she didn't just leave him up there to think he was worthless, even if he got into beacon by lying. She wanted to know what to say to him. Pyrrha closed her eyes sadly before sighing and shaking her head. She reached over and nudged him firmly. John, wake up. It's time to get up now." John's eyes popped open and he awoke in a start before realizing he was back in the room. He took a moment to rub his eyes and sit up in his bed, flinching and rubbing his sore chest due to sleeping in his armor. He winced a little before looking up to see Pyrrha silently watching him with a strange expression. "Hey, hello." The first real words they had exchanged over the last few days. "You didn't change out of your clothes?" No. I was busy doing something last night. I guess I would have just fell asleep when I got back." "Was Cardin involved?" She was met with silence, which might as well have been a yes. She looked down sadly before pointing out, "You should take off your armor." "Huh? Your armor? You slept in it? You should take it off before it irritates and chafes your skin. That happened to me quite a lot when I was younger and dozed off wearing armor." "Oh, right." He quickly fiddled with the straps securing his armor plates before muttering barely loud enough for her to hear. "Thank you." There, it wasn't impossible for them to talk. It was just hard. "You remember that Professor Good which is escorting us to Foreverfall today, right?" "Yeah, I do." "Good. Do it, John." The tired blonde looked up from removing his shoulder plate as she pressed. "Can we?" Ding ding. She shut her mouth when the notification rang on John's scroll, and he quickly answered. His tired expression looked even worse as he read the message and gave a disgruntled sigh. He shifted out of bed and grabbed his armor. "Sorry, Pyrrha, I gotta go. But something's coming up." John started for the door. Can we talk later?" Would he even be available to talk, or would he just get called over again before she could even say a word? She swallowed the bitter thought and nodded, convincing herself as best she could not to use polarity on his armor to force him to stay. John stopped and lowered his hand before turning to her. "Yeah, I want to talk to you too. I'll see you later, okay?" He gave a small nod in return, neutral in his expression before walking out and closing the door behind him. Pyrrha was left sitting in her bed as Nora mumbled in her sleep, and Ren shower filled in the silence. She silently cursed and curled her hands into fists, futile once more in her effort to help her partner and friend when they both needed it. Hunting. Did you get the wasps? John, yeah, it wasn't easy catching them from the nest you told me about. I had to hide them in my locker. Good. Great job, Johnny. John, why do you want these things anyway? Don't worry, just make sure to bring them with us on the trip today, got it? John, yeah, I got it. Good. See you then. Carter finished the text with a little smirk and relaxed into his bed and waited for the trip to the forest. Holy crap, he really did it all! Russell laughed as he looked over all the completed work and assignments John had finished for him on Cardinal's behest. He waved the papers. Cardin, I have no idea what you got on that art kid, but this is amazing. All the grade and none of the work. Cardin smirked. Yeah, got ourselves the perfect little busybody to help us through the hard times. Ain't it grand? Dove spoke up from his seat at the desk. But seriously, Cardin, what do you have on him? It must be big if you can make him jump through all these hoops without argument. Cardin wagged his fingers. You can't go spilling all the secrets. But don't worry, I'll tell you guys soon. Sky nodded. Okay, well, how long do you plan on keeping him on your on your heels like this? The rest of the year? Oh, or do you think you can milk it and make him an errand boy until graduation? Cardin hummed at the idea before nodding. I think I'm gonna let him off the hook after the field trip today. The teammates looked at him in surprise. Why? Well, as much as a blast it's been having someone on the belt for us, and even though he might not finish that project I gave him in time, I think today is the perfect time to call it quits. Cardin had a smug grin. I'll make Johnny Boy the bad guy in front of his little group of friends, and then I'll tell everyone his little secret. I can just see it now. Did he really think he was going to make it at a school like this by cheating his way through? He wasn't worthy. He wasn't strong. This school was about taking the strongest, best candidates from around the world and mold them into heroes. People that got all the adoration and praise from the people. People like him, like his team. Not this worthless cheat, and not any of his stupid little friends either. Not the prodigy little girl. Not the generational serial killer. Not the Harris that bought her way in. Not that whiskered prick who couldn't stand getting hit. Not the snarly moody girl who only read it, and not that so-called strongest of the generation. After today, he was going to knock them all down a peg. Hunting. Coming to Beacon from different kingdoms and places all over Revenant, some of the students hadn't seen everything Ville had to offer. The amazing amount of snow that falls during the winter season, the bustling city streets during the festival, or even the wonderful nightlife with sightings of a crazy blonde monster wreaking havoc from time to time. But one of the most captivating sights to behold in the Kingdom of Ville is the Forest of Forever Falls. While the landmark was well known around the world, and there were pictures and documentaries about it, none of them quite captured the beauty of seeing it firsthand. The miles of nature that stretched out in every direction on the cusp of the city's limit. The trees varies in size, but each had deep red leaves blooming from their branches that made it seem like perpetual autumn. Oh! And several students trailed behind the group as they looked around in wonder. Tendon slipped the empty jar under her armpit and plucked a fallen leaf off the ground. Oh man, this place is beautiful. Kiba walked past her and looked around with a fond smile. We should go on one of those picnics the city sets up every few months. Eating out here with the family is the best. Rue popped up under her partner's side and shocked her out of her daydream. Weiss, hey Weiss, this place is pretty cool, right? Bet you don't have anything like this over in Atlas. Weiss harumphed and turned her nose up. Don't get so excited, you dunce. It's just a forest. There's nothing exceptional or special about it. But it's really pretty, right? Weiss looked aside and nodded in reluctant agreement. Even the cold Harris had to admit that the blood-red forest was incredible to look at. Yes, students, Furfall is still quite the sight to see even after multiple visits, but do not get too comfortable. Linda warned as she guided the students through the clear paths between the numerous red trees. Furfall is home to many different kinds of grims, dangerous and docile, and there are more than enough grim roaming these acres to make any huntsman and huntress pale in fright. Also, there are very few distinct locations in the forest as a whole, which means if you wander off, you'll have to keep walking until you find civilization. And with grim-infected space, I wouldn't take those odds. Geez, thanks for the uplifting words, Professor. But that is also why we have brought our weapons with us on this outing Professor Peach tasked us with. Now, unless it is entirely necessary, I suggest you keep your weapons on standby and at all times. Miss Valkyrie, put it away. Nora grumbled sadly as she shifted her hammer back into its basic stage. No fun. The blonde just relaxed her bow and fixed her glasses again. Now, you are all each tasked with filling up your jar with the sap from these trees. If you so wish, and you brought spare jars for the purpose, you can take some sap home with you for your own desire. I can attest to its unique and delicious taste. There's an excited mumbling over her students. We'll be out here until 4, so have fun and stay safe. The students separated and bounced off into groups to collect their sap. Tendon was the first to kneel by a tree and examine it thoroughly. She created a knife and cut and dug it through the bark. So, is this like a special technique to this, or whoa, okay, it's going really fast too. Sasuke came over to her side and quickly took the jar she was filling over before switching it with his empty one. He looked over to see why staring intently between her jar and tree like she internally debated. He walked over to her side without her attention. Are you okay? She flinched in surprise before quickly nodding her head. I'm fine. Of course I'm fine. Why would you think I'm not fine? Because you look like you were going to spike that jar against the tree in anger. He pointed out blatantly. Wise nervously coughed in her hand and crossed her arms with indignity. Yes, well, I was just wondering what the importance of us gathering this sap actually provides in way of learning to fight monsters. It's just sap from a tree. Personally, I think this is just a useless exercise to waste the day and... Yeah, right, Yang said from her tree. You're just saying that now because you're worried about getting stains on your outfit. Why wouldn't I? The Harris defended with a pink hue. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get grass stains out of white clothes, let alone red grass stains? It's impossible. Oh, please. The blonde sent her a wry smirk. You've never dealt with stains before. Why did you say it like that? She pressed her brawler teammate for an answer. What are you implying? Nothing. Yang, no, that's my sap. Just one taste. You ate yours and Ren's. I want mine. Be a friend, Kiba. Get back here, you crazy woman. And Piro watched Nora run around the trees and slump over a jar of sap as Kiba desperately chased after her. Despite the two boys' best effort, he couldn't quite catch up with the sugar-charged Nora. She smiled and watched her friends gather sap with smiles on their faces. They were all so happy and content being able to have fun on such a nice day in such a beautiful location. And yet, her mind constantly shifted back to her partner that was nowhere in sight. In fact, none of Cardinal was anywhere to be seen either. Piro, you alright? Huh? She stood up straighter and saw Naruto had snuck up to her side as she had just been standing by a tree in silence. She quickly smiled and nodded. Of course. Why would you think otherwise? Because Tenten's been worried about you these past few days. Says you've been looking really distant and sad lately. Oh, and here she thought she was hiding it. Relatively well. Her shoulders sagged. Well, please tell Tenten I'm sorry for making her worry. It's just... Recently, John and I had a bit of an argument, and we haven't quite resolved it yet. Naruto nodded before looking around. I was wondering why John hadn't been around lately. Your fight? Is that the reason he'd been hanging around with Cardin in the asshole patrol? It might be, yes. Naruto narrowed his eyes. I thought something was wrong with that. I couldn't imagine him being buddy-buddy with Cardin so quickly, and I definitely can't imagine Cardin not picking on John anymore like that. He still does, Pierre muttered as her grip on the jar tightened just before she started cracking the glass. He looked between her conflicted frown and shaking hands before he felt a tinge of guilt, not noticing this earlier. What you talking about? The blonde and redhead both gave a little start and looked over to see Ruby looking between them curiously. Naruto spared the champion the need to tread back into uncomfortable territory and answered the hood girl. Pierre's just a little worried. She and John had an argument and they haven't talked about it yet. Ruby perked up. Oh, is that why he was so gloomy last night? They turned to her in surprise and she quickly stuttered. I met John in the hallway last night when I heard some weird noises. I came out and he looked all sad and kept talking about being a failure or something. He said he shouldn't be on the team with you guys. Pear felt a cold chill grip her heart and a panic fill her mind. She hesitated. What? Did you guys say anything? I said that was dumb. She honestly answered with a smile and nod. I said that he was the only leader he was the only leader your team had, so you needed him, and he wasn't allowed to think of himself as a failure anymore, no matter what. She fiddled with a jar in her hand and looked up at her older friends shyly for confirmation. I thought I convinced him pretty good and went back to sleep. So did work, or did I say something wrong? Pierre wanted to slap herself. She had been fretting and arguing with herself all this time about the right thing to do or say without even doing or saying anything. She was so worried about making things worse while they did because she didn't make an effort to fix it. But Ruby, with just some simple and kind words, had already done more to fix it than she had. He wanted to talk with her, and that was probably in no small part because of the red-clad girl's help. Pierre turned to the shorter girl with a grateful smile. Thank you, Ruby. Oh, you a great thanks for helping him where I couldn't. Ruby blushed and giggled. Oh, shut up. But shut up. It's totally cool. I didn't do much. You gonna be okay? She regarded the whiskered boy and nodded with a much lighter expression and smile. Yes, I think I'll be able to handle this after all. Thank you for your concern, Naruto. She took a relative breath in. Well, there's no point in us just standing around doing nothing. We have jars to fill up. The champion walked off with a much happier expression and joy in her step. Naruto and Ruby watched her walk off before the older teen nudged her side with a smirk. When did you get so mature and wise, huh? She puffed out her chest in pride and hummed. Yep, you're looking at Ruby Rose, super cool and mature leader of Ruby. Jealous? Sure, but don't get too ahead of yourself. Keep doing like that and you might turn into wise. She yelped and shook her head. No, I don't want to become wise. I like fun. Hey! Hunting? John felt his throat start to tighten and dry up as he filled the last jar with sap. He let out some hoarse coughs and rubbed his throat carefully before closing the lid. He gathered them all up and started dragging his feet back to Cotton and his friends. So either he was allergic to this sap stuff, or he hadn't drunk anything recently. It could be either. He was so freaking tired he couldn't think straight. He wanted to take a nap. He wanted to stop running for Cardinal whenever he got a text or call. He just wanted to be with his friends and team again. Would they still want him after he's left them so much? Would Pyrrha still want to be his partner? Would she even be able to look at him? No, stop it. Stop thinking like that. Ruby already told him that they don't need him doubting himself anymore. They needed their leader. Even if it was him, he was going to talk to Pyrrha today, and they would figure out what to do then. But what happened next to Pyrrha's acceptance or refusal would only work if he could figure out how to cut his ties with Cotton. There had to be something he could do. He could try appealing to Cotton's good nature and warmth. Nope. What about offering a favor? Oh wait, offering favors was a moot point if he was already doing everything for him under threat of expulsion. Violence? No, putting aside the fact that Cardin would have probably whoop his butt if he tried. He didn't feel right solving this through hurting people, even if it was Cardin. John's thought came to a halt as he walked past some trees and arrived to see Cardinal lounging on the ground in peace. Cardin had a large hand on top of the box of rapier wasps and jostled them around out of boredom. They obviously didn't like that because he could hear them buzzing from here. He walked into their sight and the massive teen waved him over. He and his lackeys pulled up to their feet and grabbed the box of wasps. Hey there, Johnny boy. You got back fast. Excellent work. John just narrowed his brow in response as he held out the box of jars for them. Cotton clicked his teeth and pushed the box back. Not so fast, John. No, I bet you're wondering why we asked you to fill some extra jars, right? John looked at the several extra containers he filled before shrugging. Oh no, I just thought you wanted some syrup for yourself or something. This stuff smells really sweet. Good guess, but nope. Cotton interrupted as he started leading his group and John away. Follow me. I'll show you what we're gonna do with all this sap you picked for us. John followed at a more reserved pace as they came out into an open area leading into a small cliff. Cotton looked around and nodded with satisfaction before placing the box of bugs down safely. Yeah, this place is perfect. The rest of Cardinal stood around them silently as John looked around in worry. Cardinal walked over and took the box before laying it down and plucking a jar out for himself. He brought an arm around John's shoulders. John, do you want to quit hanging out with us? Darkboy's eyes widened and he looked up at the larger teen. What? I asked if you want to stop doing what you're doing. It's okay to tell the truth, even though I know how hard that is for you. John looked worried about the result his answer would make these guys do. Before he could answer, Cardin patted his back reassuringly. It's all right, buddy. I think today I'm going to let you off the hook for good. Really? He wished he didn't sound so desperate replying to his offer. Yep, clean slate. All's good and fair after this. One last job, and all is well. Cardin smiled as he handed the jar of sap to John. You ready? Yeah, sure. A free pass after doing one last thing. How could he pass that up? Take this jar. Cardin's finger trailed over the cliffside and throw it there. Take the jar and throw it. Where his friends and teammates were gathered together to collect their saps and talk. What is it? Didn't you hear me, Johnny? Connor repeated with a firm edge as he shook his shoulders. I said throw that jar and everything will be square. He hid a smirk from John's sight. Don't worry, it's not like it's going to do anything. They've got the aura. All it'll do is freak them out a bit and they'll be fine. They'll go into a panic. All those strong and powerful figures that had made an image to the school would be reduced to blubbering, crying messes while they ran from the wasps. Ark would be blamed. Cardian would catch him in the act, and he could turn him in and reveal his secret. Cardian and his team would be renowned for their action, and the liars will get everything they deserve. Just throw the jar, John, and everything will be all right. John looked between the jar in his hands and the friends down below. He couldn't do this. This was horrible. This was horrific. He'd be hurting his friends, the people he cared about. No way. But if he didn't, then everyone would know his secret. He'd lose his chance to become a huntsman. He'd be expelled and shamed for the rest of his life. He couldn't go home to mom and dad and the others like this. He'd be a black stain even more than he already was. The others were strong. They were so strong. There's no way wasps would hurt them like Carden would think. John gripped the jar in his hand and looked down from the cliff. In time to see Pyrrha look back at Ren and Nora with a smile. No. What? I said no. John repeated as he looked down at the jar before dropping it in the grass. He closed his eyes before opening them back up with a solid glare and turning towards Carden. I'm not doing it, Carden. The Winchester's face twisted into anger before he whispered out in a growl. What are you doing? Just throw out the damn jar and that's it. I won't tell anyone your secret. I won't tell anyone you don't deserve to be here. Tell them. Carden reeled back at John's demand as the blonde took a shaky breath and stood his ground. I don't care what you do or say anymore. I'm not doing errands for you. I'm not working for you. And I'm definitely not hurting any of my friends for you. John shook his head and said defiantly, so whatever you want to do, just do it. It won't be as bad as following your orders. Carden's face lashed out and caught John in the cheek before he fell down hard. The Winchester was seething with rage as he stood over the blonde that gently held his bruised face. Carden flared his teeth and shook his head. Oh, believe me, John, what I'll do is much worse. Hunting. The bigger shadow reached down and pulled something up before it disappeared into the shadow of a cliff. Naruto wasn't sure what he just saw, but by the time he turned around, the cliff's top was empty, but the foreboding sense of unease still hadn't disappeared. Sasuke noticed his friend kneeling in the grass and glaring up at something. He followed John's gaze and landed on the empty edge of the cliff. He inquired, Did you see something? Maybe. Not quite sure, but I can check. Naruto pushed up to his feet. Kiba, he said. He tossed his partner his jar. Hold on to that for me. Don't let Nora eat it. Don't ask for the impossible. Hunting. Ah! And John yelped as he fell to the ground in a heap and gave a ragged cough in pain. He struggled onto his hands and knees and cradled his ribs while Dove, Sky, and Russell stood over him. John tried to look up at them before Carden's foot came swinging in and caught him in the side. He gasped and fell down again as the tall leader stood over him. Get up, come on, John. Get back up like the hero you think you are. I'd just rather stay down here if it's all the same to you. I just sort of lost my breath. Carden looked between his teammates and they hoisted John up with a hold under each arm. The orange-haired giant took a deep breath through his nose and felt his shoulders heave in a fury. He stepped forward and got the tired boy's attention. What do you think you're doing? Do you think you're being cool doing this? Acting like a smug hero sacrificing himself to do something right? Well, newsflash, you idiot. You didn't do anything right. You're a liar and a failure, and this is everything you deserve for cheating. So how about that? How does that make you feel? John remained silent for a good few seconds before giving a small shrug at indifference. The getting beat up part sucked, but not having to follow Carden's demands anymore. Priceless. Carden felt the veins start to pulse and his arm shake from the tension in his fist. Carden. Sky looked between his leader and the haggard blonde before shaking his head. I think this guy has had enough. This ain't gonna work. We should just ditch him and give Goodwitch our jars. Shut up! Carden barked and frightened his team with disdain in his voice. Carden cracked his knuckles. This bastard wants to learn stuff so bad. Fine, I'll teach him what it's like to get beat with an inch of consciousness. Let him go. They froze. The Cardinal members looked over in shock as Carden lowered his fist. He made a sharp inhale before slowly turning around to face the whiskered blonde on the other side of the clearing. Now the glare was emphasized by the furrow of his bandana as he growled out through grit teeth. I said, let him go. Now! Skynda prepared to release John before Carden sent them a death glare to stay. He turned back towards Naruto and grumbled. What do you want? Can't you see we're busy? I say you messing with my friend. He sent a glance back at the partly bruised and beaten John as he felt his anger rise. Now don't make me say it again. Drop him. Cardin scared them still with a look before taking a few steps out to face Naruto. The ginger huntsman in training took a few steps before stopping with a wry smile on his face. He shook his head. Just so you know, Uzumaki, you're wasting your time calling this guy your friend. Naruto just narrowed his eyes and took a few steps forward to match him. Yeah, Johnny boy. John over there isn't who he said he is. John slowly raised his head and met Naruto's eyes as Cardin continued. He's a liar, a fraud. He doesn't deserve to be here. John lowered his head again, shamefully at the true words, as harsh as they were. Cardin hacked at them over his shoulder. He'll never be a huntsman. He ain't smart enough. He definitely ain't strong enough. He's not brave enough. He yelled vehemently, desperate to make the boy in front of him see how unworthy John was. Despite his contempt for the whiskered blonde, at least he earned his way into the school. Do you get that? Do you understand what that means? It means he's never going to be a huntsman. He doesn't deserve to be one. And you think you do? Cardin's anger was quickly snuffed out by the boy's quick retort. He merely stared at Naruto as he said through his scowl, "Look what you're doing, beating someone up because you don't like them, trying to justify it because they're weaker and not as good as you. That's not what a huntsman does, Cardin. Huntsmen help people. Huntsmen do what they can to protect people. They put their lives on the line against impossible and unfavorable odds because that's what they do." Naruto was panting after his outburst before shaking his head in derision. "John may not be strong, but I've seen him still try to help people despite that, and that makes him 100 times more of a huntsman than you." Him? He wasn't as good of a huntsman as a liar. Cardin took a deep breath and his shoulders trembled in anger before he growled out in a thick, furious voice, "I'm going to send him crying home where he belongs. But first," he pointed to Naruto, "I'm going to break you and put you down hard enough that you won't get back up." Naruto squared off across from the armor-clad giant and matched his glare. Velvet's words echoed through his ears. The futility of physically fighting opposition like this, that it could only make things worse, and that people like this never changed. But then another voice followed after, rougher tone and even rougher words. Let me tell you a cold, sad truth, kid. Actions speak louder than the words. You can try to make friends, you can try to joke, you can try to convince them who you are, but they don't care, and they won't care, because they already made a decision, and they won't ever change that choice with just the words they hear. But action, the choice you make and the result it creates, that will stick forever. He shook his head furiously to try and rid the horrid voice from his mind, not to struggle to focus again before his head shifted up to see Cardin striding towards him with his shoulders wide and his fingers clenched. Fine, if this guy wouldn't listen to anything he said, then he'd knock his head around until something stuck. Shh, put him up, Uzumaki. And Cardin raised his fist as Naruto bounced on his toes. I don't want anyone running to your rescue when I plant you in the ground. Ugh! Cardin threw a wide fist out and met nothing as Naruto stepped back to avoid. The bulky teen pushed forward and threw fist after fist to catch the blonde's head in anger, but was met with empty space. Naruto leaned, ducked, and sidestepped out of Cardin's reach with each potential strike, as his face never shifted from its glare. Cardin roared and swung the back of his fist out in a desperate attempt as Naruto stepped in to the wide opening. The whiskered boy yelped and pushed up into Cardin's chin, knocking his head back before Naruto slammed his shoulder into Cardin's breastplate and pushed him back. The cardinal leader stumbled back and found his footing before charging forward again to attack. He threw punches at Naruto, who had to avoid more adamantly to dodge. Naruto ducked under a fist and popped up on Cardin's other side. The ginger growled and attempted to elbow the boy in the face, but Naruto's arms came up and blocked the full force of Cardin's arm with his own before his face stuck out and caught Cardin's nose. Cardin groaned before swinging both arms out in lariats to clothesline him, but Naruto stepped into the attack and slipped under them before stopping directly behind Cardin's back. The Noctix leader kicked Cardin's leg in and toppled the giant in an instant. Cardin struggled and tried to fight back from the ground as Naruto's fist struck out and hit him several times faster than he could even fight back. Cardin's aura shielded him from any lingering damage, but the fast strikes to his temple and bridge rung through his guard and shocked him. A hammer fist came down on his jaw and knocked him down to the grass as Naruto stood over him. Time to stop. Cardin didn't have size and strength, but he relied on using his mace as a weapon and form of form of intimidation. His hand-to-hand was average at best, and he wasn't going to use his weapon because he didn't want to risk alerting Glinda or the others. But Naruto had made sure he could fight with or without a weapon when the time came. Even if he didn't have the aura to augment his strength, his fighting skills more than made up for it. Cardinal's leader huffed and pounced up and was met with a quick kick to the chin that knocked him back over. The bully fell on his back with a heap and took several deep breaths as his teammates called out in worry. "Keep going, Cardin. You can do this, man. Take him out." He was trying, damn it. But this bastard was slippery. Cardin growled through his grit teeth and looked back up at the blonde. He groaned. "That all you got, Uzumaki?" Naruto brought forward and he started forward before jumping up to throw out a kick. Ha! Cardin pounced up and caught Naruto midair as his kick lashed out and slid along his breastplate. He fell forward with Naruto still in his grasp as they landed harshly in the grass. Naruto letting out a pained gasp as the drop combined with Cardin's weight fell squarely on his chest. He was pinned to the ground as Cardin lifted himself up and prepared to rabbit punch him before he could get up. Naruto quickly guarded and turned his body to block the punch with his shoulder. He winced in pain before lashing elbow out and catching Cardin in the corner of his eye. The larger teen screamed as Naruto pulled his legs out from underneath him and got up to his knees. He turned on the ground and caught the Winchester's cheek with a hook kick, feeling the sturdier boy as his aura saved him from a dislocated jaw. The whiskered boy quickly climbed up to his feet as Cardin remained dazed from the rapid strikes that hit him. Cardin grit his teeth and started pushing off his knees to stand up. Naruto yelled as he jumped and spun in the air, getting some extra power as his feet came together and landed a drop kick across the bully's face. Cardin spun out and landed on the ground with a thump as Naruto quickly got himself and stood back up. Cardinal's leader groaned as he struggled to catch his breath and lift himself up. His breathing was ragged from trying to keep up with Naruto's superior martial arts, and he wasn't sure how much aura he had left. "Give up, Cardin," Naruto said, his breathing a little heavy, but no worse for wear after their brawl. He shook his head and stood up tall. "You can't beat me. It's over. Over. It's not over until he beat up this whiskered punk to teach him a lesson, and after that he was going to kick the shit out of Ark and expose him to everyone." His teammates were calling out his name and cheering him on to continue that. That was what it meant to be a huntsman, people recognizing that you were strong and worthy of being the best. That's what huntsmen were always supposed to be. He was going to prove it to these boys, and then the rest of those other freshmen too. He pushed himself up to his knees to fight again. He was Cardin Winchester, going to be the best huntsman out of Beacon, the strongest, and he was going to make this bastard. He froze. Russell Dove and Sky went silent and stood in fear. Even John, with his bruised eyes and face, could only stare in shock. Naruto was the only one confused by the sudden stillness before he felt a heavy breathing run over his back. Naruto's body went still, no sudden movements. Gently, ever so gently, he turned his head to look over his shoulder. The black beast was massive, hunched over in its stature and standing well over 10 feet tall. Its menacing red eyes pierced into all of them as it growled and looked between them all. It had patches and islands of bone armor over its limbs and body, with the most collected of it covering its back and creating long spikes that jutted outwards. That was a big Ursa, an Ursa Major, unfortunately. It didn't take long for him to figure out why it was there, and they were angry. Naruto was furious at the bully and his buddies hurting his friends, and he was getting more than the necessary amount of satisfaction from knocking him around. Connor was angry that he was getting beat and kept imagining how he was going to hurt them back if he got the chance. Cardinal was anxious watching their leader fight, and John was afraid his friend would get hurt. They had lured in agreement with their negative emotions. Naruto slowly turned his head back to face the others and could clearly see the fright in their eyes. He looked down and Cardin looked back up as the Winchester struggled to get his breath. "Don't move. No sudden movements. Just wait a second and they can..." Cardin panicked and sprung up to his hands and knees to crawl away from the Ursa's reach. Naruto cursed as the Ursa was triggered and brought its massive paw up to attack. He turned and saw the lash coming down towards him. As he did a handspring to avoid its path, he popped back up on his feet and pulled out a short sword as he dashed in and struck its knees. The Ursa Major didn't topple or even notice the kata as it put its full weight and force behind a second wide swipe at the fighter beside it. Naruto quickly rolled underneath the massive creature's legs and came up behind it. He pulled out his katana and came up to his feet before swiping rapidly at the back of the Ursa's legs. catching against pieces of the bone armor and gaining the attention of the Grim. John was dropped in the grass as the rest of Cardinal scurried off in a panic. He heard them run off and looked back, ready to follow them, but as he thought about it, his arms and legs seized up and he was stuck on the ground. He could only hear the sound of his heartbeat drum through his ears and head as he slowly looked back to where his friend fought off the Ursa, and Cardin got back up to on his feet. Naruto kept swinging against Ursa and avoiding its mighty yet slow attacks, but the cuts Naruto left didn't do much to the behemoth because of its thick hide and constantly blocking with its sturdy back. If he could just get the time to tie up his blades, he could make quick work of this monster. The Ursa bucked up and forced Naruto to back before it lunged forward to tear into him. Naruto yelled as he jumped back and avoided the bite altogether, bringing his short blade down and into the Ursa's red eye. The Grim screeched a defining wail as it popped up on his hind legs and waved its paws around in agony. Naruto took his opportunity to gain some distance and get his weapons together. He reached into his pack and pulled out a length of steel wire to tie his blades. Move! Cardin came running in and knocked Naruto over as he charged ahead with his mace in hand. He ignored Naruto's yell to come back as the Ursa calmed down and locked Cardin in with his one bloody eye. Let the others run. Let them cower in retreat. He was going to be a huntsman. He swung out. Ha! Ha! The Ursa's paw came down and tore the mace out of Cardin's grip. The larger teen was left defenseless before the Ursa's arms came back up and struck him directly under the chin. Cardin's body was covered in burnt orange glow before it disappeared completely. His aura was depleted. Cardin landed flat on his back and let out a pained groan as his eyes were swimming in his head. He gasped for air and struggled to prop himself on his elbow as the massive Grim towered over him. The monster's form was daunting. Cardin swore he could see his life flash before his eyes. This was it. He was dead. He saw a barrage of small arrows come flying over and impact against the monster's side, but only annoyed it. But the monster raised his paw up to strike. Cardin, move! Naruto came flying in and kicked Cardin as hard as he could, knocking him away. Naruto was left in the Ursa's path and raised his sword to block as his claw came down, the claws pushing into the sword and ripping into Naruto's forearm and bicep as the blonde was sent flying from the attack. Ah! Naruto rolled around in the dirt and clutching his bloody arm to support the gash. That was a lot of blood. He couldn't tell what was his and what was the grass. Oh man, his sleeve got ripped up too. It was a nice sleeve. Oh God! Naruto cursed under his breath as he felt it coming again. He grit his teeth through the pain and huffed out as best he could. Control, breathe, just. It hurt too much. He couldn't concentrate. Come on, Cardin, you asshole. Get out while you can. Naruto patted and pushed up on his forehead as he saw the Ursa stalk towards him with a growl. The whiskered boy grit his teeth and his blue eyes focused in on the Ursa's single red. He forced himself onto his knees as his injured arm started to release a faint orange glow that started climbing up. If he didn't have any other way, then thunk! John came running in from the side and slammed straight into the Ursa's bad eye with his shield. He prepared to attack with his sword, but the beast roared and forced the armor-clad blonde back. The Ursa forgot about the injured Naruto and the stunned Cardin as it focused on John. John took a deep breath and slammed his sword against his shield and to draw its tension away. Hey! He did it some more. Hey, ugly, come get me. Yeah, I'm not as big as Amigo, but I'm lean and stuff, and come get me. The Ursa roared and charged forward as John got into a poor stance. Crusader Moors in his hands. He gulped in fear and stood his ground as best as the beast approached. He acted on instinct and jumped in the Ursa's blind spot to avoid his charge, but the monster shifted and caught Cardin's side with one of its spikes. The lanky blonde was then tumbling to the ground harshly as just the creature of Grim roared and darted towards him again. John scrambled to his feet and yelled as he swung his blade out to try and catch the Ursa before it could reach. His sword smacked the massive paw away before it could reach, and John stepped forward to pierce its belly. The Ursa roared and brought its other paw down into John's side, sending the boy spiraling before he bounced off the ground. He quickly caught himself and charged forward before the Ursa could attack Naruto or Cardin. John's blade came across its shoulder and he got a shriek of pain from the beast. He chambered his sword again and prepared to slash out. There's paw came up from beneath and caught John's shield, slamming the top of it directly into his forehead with enough force to flip him through the air several times. He yelled before landing face first into the ground with a cry of pain. Oh, that hurt. John struggled up to his hands and knees as a dull ring went through his ears. He could hear his own panic, the uneven breathing pattern as something slowly dripped onto the grass beneath him. It started to slide down his face and sting his eyes for a moment before he had to close them. Blood. Was this blood? Some came onto his lips and he tasted metal. Yep. That was blood. Maybe if it was any other normal circumstance, he would have gone numb in the legs and gagged, but he already felt numb enough, so there wasn't any point to that. He looked down at his shield and saw there was a line of blood over the top of it from where it hit him. This was bad. Someone had to help them. Anyone beside him. Someone had to come and save them. But there wasn't. Right now, he was the only one still capable of fighting. He had to protect Cardin and Naruto no matter what. It didn't matter if he wasn't strong enough. He needed to do it now. John roared. At least he thinks he roared because he still only heard the ringing, and charged off the ground as the Ursa came running towards him as well. It jumped up and swung its claw out as John guarded against it. The force of the attack pulled the shield off his arm and sent it clattering over the clearing. The students slowed to a stop and looked to see the Ursa reeling back to attack again. No. John held his hand out to block the Ursa's swipe, and a bright light covered his vision. Everything turned white as snow for a moment as the ringing in his ears slowly disappeared. He thought he was dead until he heard the pained, confused groan of the Ursa as well after the strange phenomena subsided. The groom was dazed, stumbling back on its massive foundation before it quickly composed itself. It reeled back to strike. Now. Ha! John stabbed up and threw the Ursa's head from under the jaw. The Grim released one last dying gurgle before its arms went slack and hung by its side. John was panting for air and looked up at the monster towering over him before he grit his teeth, pulled the sword out, and spun around before catching its neck and lopping off its entire head in one sweep. The decapitated head bounced off to the side, and John's arms fell in exhaustion. His grip on his sword somehow held as he gasped for air and felt the cool sensation fill his lungs. John struggled to keep his balance as he looked up and saw the Ursa's body falling over him due to the lack of its head. Timber! The sharp yank on his sword pulled John off his feet and away from being crushed by the Ursa's body. He landed on his back and lay there for a moment as he gasped for air. How did that happen? What? Oh, who cares? He's alive. His grip finally weakened, and the sword slipped from his hands as his throat started drying up. He was thirsty, ill, and he could feel the blood on his face starting to harden. Oh, holy crap, John! John's eyes opened and he looked up to regard the armor-clad ginger that had finally recovered, caught in watch and awe as the Ursa's major's body started to fade away into black mist. The taller boy looked down at the blonde. It could only let out a cracked laughter in astonishment. I can't believe you did that. That was crazy. I didn't know you had it. Stop trying to hurt them. Cardin stopped. Huh? John struggled to get to his feet, and even when he did, he looked like he was going to topple over, but he looked up at the larger boy with firmness in his eyes. Just stop. I'm fine. I deserve it. If you think I'm not good enough to be here, maybe you're right, but my friends are off limits. John said with an edge in his voice. We're all on the same side, Cardin, so stop fighting them. He was going to lecture him. Cardin paused. He looked over John's bloody face. He spared a glance over at the remains of the Ursa. He knew Naruto was back there clutching his arm, getting injured after protecting him from the Ursa's attack. He didn't like John or Naruto, but he was still angry. And you think you do? Cardin was silent, stone-faced as he looked forward before giving a sharp nod and walking away. Yeah, okay. John watched him leave before he let out a long sigh of relief. He thought he was gonna have to fight again. He wasn't sure how much more he could take. Could his aura protect him from another beating? Did he still have aura? Why was his head hurting then? Did the Ursa smack his shield so hard this was the best aura could do? You okay, John? The boy was brought out of his thoughts and looked over to see Naruto kneeling on the ground, still clutching his injured arm. Naruto! John shrieked and ran up to him as the whiskered boy looked up. Are you okay? How's your arm? Oh man, that looks bad. Is it going to be okay? Or are your bones all... I'm fine. Naruto opened and closed his fist a few times to assure him. The damage is already healing. I just need a little time and I'll be all good. What about you? He pointed up at John's head. That's a nasty gash you got there. Oh, John touched his forehead and yelped in pain as a horrible sting spread through his head. Tears filled the corner of his eyes as he whined. How did I not feel this before? It hurts so much. That's the adrenaline. You don't feel a lot of pain when that stuff kicks in, but when it leaves, oh, it's a doozy. Naruto grinned and shrugged. Don't worry, you'll get used to it. I will. Yep. Naruto's grin grew even bigger. Keep charging in and being a hero like you did, and you'll totally just get used to it. John blinked. Hero? Naruto, John. They looked over to see Ruby, Kiba, Wise, and Pyrrha coming running into the clearing and calling out to them. Their voices were filled with worry, fright, anger, and a little pride as they asked what had happened. Pyrrha trailed behind the group and watched her partner get ganged up on with questions. She knew she should have panicked seeing him fight an Ursa like that, and she should be worried about the blood and injury on his head, but she couldn't help the smile that spit over her face, or the pride that filled her chest to see him do what he did. Hunting. Ow, ow, ow! Please stop! Ow! John cried out as the nurse continued to suture the cut on his forehead with threaded needle. She continued to patch him up as he moaned in pain. Couldn't you have numbed the pain or something? I did. You shouldn't be feeling any of it. You're just so scared you think you feel it. The nurse replied as John's face heated up in shame. The Beacon's nurse motioned behind her to his fellow infirmary visitor. Too bad you don't do what your friend does. He would be every doctor's dream patient if he wasn't so uppity and annoying. Naruto glared at the older woman's back as he pointed on his bed. Can I go now? I'm pretty sure my arm's all fixed up now. Let me finish with your friend and I'll check it out. Once I'm done, you kids can go off and do whatever else you do to end up here. The nurse narrowed her eyes before nodding. Okay. She grabbed a large bandage and applied over John's wound before standing up. Keep that covered for a little longer, and your aura will start working its magic. Be grateful you didn't get a concussion. You'll be fine. John touched the bandage before asking, So, is it just gonna disappear, or... Oh no, you've got a scar now, kid, the nurse interrupted. You can keep it as a memento of the time you killed an Ursa, or better yet, as a reminder that you should call for help before facing something that big yourself. I'll be right back. She walked away and John seemed perplexed by the idea of him having a battle scar. He was worried before Naruto spoke up. Hey, think of it like this. Now you've got proof that you were a total badass hero. Naruto smiled and waved his arm around for emphasis. I don't get those, but considering that if I did, I'm pretty sure my arm would be mangled. I'm not really complaining. Yeah, John said quietly as he mulled over his thoughts. He hesitated before looking up at his friend. Naruto, he looked over. What you said to Cardin? When you defended me and said I could be a huntsman? Why did you say that? John seemed to shrink in his bed and ask uncertainly. I mean, the things he said were mean, sure, but he wasn't totally wrong. John, you're my friend, but you are not a very good fighter, Naruto bluntly said before he shrugged. But did you see what you did? You charged forward at that Grim because you wanted to save me and Cardin. You looked scared, but you did it anyway because you knew it was the right thing to do. Strength and skill are things you can get from a lot of training, but the drive to help people and run in like that, not everyone has that. That's why I think you deserve to be a huntsman. John just stared at his friend in surprise before quietly asking, Really? Totally, the whiskered boy shrugged. Plus, you willingly helped at your Cardin even though he bullied you and beat you up. Do you have any idea how many people can actually do something like that without thinking? Not a lot. Naruto asked rhetorically before shaking his head. I'm pretty sure I couldn't do something like that even if I tried. Well, that's a lie. Huh? John shook his head. I mean, Cardin was gonna get hurt by the Ursa, but you came in and knocked him out of the way before he got hurt. Even though you could have died doing that, and you don't even like him. So, why did you? Naruto's smile fell and he blinked in surprise before he scratched his cheek. Well, I don't know. I mean, I sort of saw him in trouble and I just reacted. Well, that's amazing too, John pointed out. I had to think about charging in there, but you just did it. The scraggly blonde smiled to his bewildered friend. I think you'll be a pretty amazing huntsman too, Naruto. Naruto actually felt the pink hue come up to his face at the compliment as he laughed nervously. Yeah, keep complimenting me. See how that saves you. He slid off the bed before pointing sternly at his friend. You gotta fix stuff with Pyrrha, okay? She's been worried sick about you lately. I don't know what happened, but are you gonna take care of it? John was surprised to hear that. Not shocked, just happy to hear she actually was worried about him after all that had happened. He nodded as Naruto smiled and walked out to the infirmary. I'll see you later, buddy. Enjoy the badge of honor. John watched his friend leave and smiled to himself, and not its encouraging words, but then his thoughts turned to his lie and what he should do about it. The nurse came back into his side and she groaned, "Did the other one leave already?" "Yes, man." "Ugh." She shook her head. "Why did I take this job? All the kids here are so rowdy." She shook her head before looking at him. "All right, let me get you signed out and you can go back to your room." "Well, I'm glad to see my students are doing as well after their little encounter. I see you're doing better, Mr. Ark." They looked over and saw Osmond walking in with his cane in hand. The headmaster looked around and inquired to the nurse, "I thought I heard Mr. Uzumaki was being treated here as well." "He was," the nurse said with a frown, "but he walked out before I could get a final check on him. Just missed him. Ask Goodwish to check his ear, to chew his ear off when she sees him again, will you?" "I'll do my best." Osmond nodded before he turned back towards the entrance. "I should probably get out of your way." "Wait, Professor," John called out, getting their attention before he sat back in his bed and quickly asked, "And can I talk to you about something?" Osmond made his way over to the bed Naruto used and sat on its edge as John did the same with his. The nurse quickly excused herself. "Well, John, what is it that you wish to talk about?" It's about how I came to Beacon." Osmond's face didn't change. "Oh, and why would we need to talk about that?" I didn't get here like other people. I didn't earn my spot here. I don't think I can be a hunter. Why do you think some people are so willing to take on this job, Mr. Ark?" John reeled back at the interruption. "Huh? Why do you think so many people want to become huntsmen and huntresses?" He reiterated. "The recognition, the praise, the adoration, the adventure, the thrill. Because it might be fun. I've heard all these answers and 100 more from so many of my students over the years that I can't remember them all. Some of them are idealistic, some are realistic, some just want to dream, and others think it's really the only thing they can do with their lives. Everyone has a different vision of what being a hunter is like. But what you experience today is the closest thing I can say to what it actually feels like." John was silent as the older man continued. "A foreboding sense of fear, daunting tasks and monsters around you, but you press on because that's what you're supposed to do, what you were trained to do." Osmond motioned to the bandage on John's head. "Despite the injuries you get," he tapped the bed he sat in, "or the friends that could get hurt, you have to continue going because you're supposed to protect people that can't protect themselves. You'll receive criticism and blame and anger from people just as much as you shall receive praise. They will not agree with you on everything, and some days you will find it hard to do what you do, but you have to anyway because someone has to." Osmond looked up and locked John's blue eyes with his brown orbs. John felt like he was being looked through by the older man before he continued. "John, for someone that believes he doesn't have the training or the worth to become a huntsman, yet still came here anyway, I see them as either the greatest fool in the world or a great hero in the making. Or both." He sat forward and caused the young boy to gulp. "So I'll ask you myself, and think clearly, because strength and skill will help you fight the grim, but it will not protect you forever. So will you continue on this path? A path I can assure you will be filled with just as much pain as it will joy, despair as it does triumph, when you may be faced with days where you will lose yourself or even worse, those that you hold dearest to you, and you may not have a way to help them. Despite this, would you continue forward and become a huntsman?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because we have to." It was silent between the two men before Osmond fixed his glasses and shrugged. "Then I suppose your prior credentials really can't play a factor in that choice," he said plainly as he stood up and started off towards the exit. He looked back to the young blonde and nodded. "Welcome to Beacon, Mr. Ark." John was left silent on his bed and left sitting on his bed in silence as he let Osmond's words sink in. Was he ready to be a huntsman? Hunting. Pierre walked up the stairway and opened the roof door with a creak. When she walked out, she finally found her partner standing by the edge of the roof, wearing just his jeans and hoodie, removing his armor to wash the blood off of it. He didn't seem to notice her arrival as she walked up behind him and spoke. "I'm glad to see you're up and about. Will you be okay?" He looked back at his partner before smiling and tapping the bandage on his head. "Yeah, the nurse said it's just gonna scar, though. My little badge of honor. Or stupidity, if I think of it in a different light." He played with the bangs of his hair and shrugged. "I guess I could grow my hair out a little and see if I can cover it." "I suppose," she nodded before asking. "No Cardin today?" "No Cardin," he affirmed before quickly panicking and looking over to the side of the roof to see the window shut. He blew a sigh of relief before nodding. I think me and Cardin are all right now, or at least I think so." "That's good." Pyrrha muttered, not really paying attention as she built up the nerve to say what she wanted to say. John, he turned back to her. I'm sorry I walked away that night. I wasn't sure what to do, but it shouldn't have been that. No, John disagreed. Nothing that happened then was your fault. I'm sorry I didn't ask you to stay or help. His eyes looked down with guilt and his shoulders slumped. I really wanted to be the super cool hero that could do anything if I put my mind to it, like the underdog that could use his will or whatever. I just thought it could work, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that was pretty moronic. Stupid, yeah. And when I thought about it, I felt like a imbecile. Tool, he corrected before shaking his head in shame. I'm sorry for making you worry, and I'm sorry I haven't been there with our team these last few days, but if you'll still have a moronic tool like me as your leader, I'd like to come back. He got his answer as Pierre stepped forward and placed a confirming hand on his shoulder with a smile. You're the only person who could be our leader, John, moron or not. Pierre said with a laugh before beckoning him to follow. Come on, we're going to do the pancake for dinner, the thing Nora and Ren suggested. We even saved some syrup we hid from Nora to put on them. Kiba figured out if you overfeed her with syrup and she gets sick, she won't try to eat it anymore. It just took a lot of effort and a lot of syrup. They smell delicious. Pyrrha, he looked back to her as she nervously dug his feet into the roof. I know I made you and the others worried a lot lately, and I'm pretty sure if I asked now, you definitely tell me to take a long walk off the roof. But I finally realized that if I want to be strong, I'm gonna have to train for it. So someday, not anytime soon, if you don't want, but someday, could I take you up on that offer for training? Pierre didn't respond. She stayed quiet for several moments, and John had worried that he had ruined the friendship they had just mended. He waited with anticipation as Pierre slowly stalked towards him, with swinging her hips for some reason. Pierre kicked his leg out and toppled him in an instant. He rubbed his back before looking up to see a cheeky smile on her face. With her hands on her hips, she said with a light-hearted tone, You have a really bad stance. You'll never be able to fight without proper footing. Proper footing, got it? He climbed back up to his feet and looked down. What's proper footing? Put your feet as close as physically possible, and then stand up like you're a stick. Okay. He complied and followed her directions. So this is proper fighting. Whoa. She knocked him over again, and he looked up with a pout. You know I have a head injury, right? Are you going to keep doing this? Last time, I swear, she said with a laugh before she offered him a hand. He was pulled to his feet before she said in a more serious tone, Spread your legs out to be able to be about the same distance apart as your shoulders. He followed her directions and spread them apart. Good. Now place the foot of the same side as your dominant hand back a little to steady yourself. He nodded, taking the moment to remember he was right-handed before putting his right foot back. Good. Pierre tried to push him again and was met with much more resistance now with his proper stance. John blinked in surprise and smiled before looking himself over. Pierre nodded proudly to her partner. Good, John. This will be your first step. First step to what? To become a huntsman. End of chapter 32.